Hi, and welcome to another episode of Hops and Houses. I'm Robert Ring.
And I'm Valerie Kroll.
Today we are at Fieldwork in San Ramon. This is the new development shopping center over here that was built.
It's a couple of years old.
A couple of years old.
Yeah.
Newish.
Newish.
Yeah, that's designed by a wonderful Italian architect. I don't remember his name, but I heard a presentation by the city developer one time talk about this. It's very cool. It's nice
I'm sure
layout.
it's Giovanni something or other.
Probably, yeah. All right, so let's start out with the beers we have. So here, when you ask to taste a beer, they charge you for it and they pour you a taster. So I just said, heck, I'm going to go with it. So I got 3 tasters. So I'll start with the one I'm drinking on my left, your right, which is going to be the old technology. They call it a pre-prohibition lager. I probably should have heard the story behind that before I ordered it. But old world ingredients come together to form rich graininess, hints of citrus, and a respectable alcohol by volume. A very crisp and dry finish. It's a lager. It's nice and light, though, a little bit of a cloudiness to it, and it's 6% alcohol by volume. And it's good. It's actually the description that I read is very accurate for how this beer tastes. I like it quite a bit. I might get a full one of these when we're done.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, what do you
So
drinking?
we're going to hang out and drink beer?
Probably.
Okay, awesome. Well, this one, I got a taster of this one because I didn't think I was going to like it, and I love it. And I got it because of the title, which was Everbong.
Everbong.
Everbong, yeah. So I'm like, does this taste like bong water? It does not taste like bong water. It's a 5.4. Is it on there? Yeah, it's up at the top of the next page. And
We have a handy cheat sheet here that they gave us.
yeah, it's very approachable. It's not, even though they say it's hoppy, it's not over hopped at all.
Okay, so it says approachable, not over hopped, rip through the juice, can of pineapple chunks. That was a pretty accurate description.
Yeah, because it's definitely got some pineapple on it, and it's a very good. Now it's not a afternoon drinking blah blah blah, but as far as an after work, grab a beer with your friends, this is a beautiful beer.
Okay, so it actually says. Do you want me to read the actual description?
Sure,
I was trying
sure.
to make it match what you were saying, but it says tastes like taking a bong rip through the juice from a can of pineapple chunks. Low ABV coming in at 5% with a super dry finish and light bitterness and low resinous character.
I would agree with that.
That's really good.
Yeah.
Can you imagine the brewmaster getting stoned and going, what if we throw pineapple juice in our bong?
Exactly.
And then he likes it. He goes, what if we make a beer that
It
tastes
tastes
like this?
like beer, man.
That's this one here?
Yeah,
Can
and
I taste that?
yeah, absolutely. It's delicious.
Yeah, that totally reminds me of that one time that I put pineapple juice in my bong. What else are you drinking there? What's your second one?
Well, let's see. I've got the Hills and Valleys,
Okay.
which is a light one. It's what do they call it? American Pilsner, 5% ABV, of course. Crisp, clean, crackery, complex, classic lager notes and aromas of peony petals. I don't even know what a peony is.
Peony. It's a flower.
Yeah. Toasted crackers. I hate crackers. Fresh hay and wild white peach skins.
That's a really interesting combination. Peony petals, toasted crackers, fresh hay, and white peach skins. It almost sounds like I'm like a grazing animal.
Pretty much. Except for it's really, really good.
What would my goat like to drink?
Hills and Valleys.
Yeah, hills and valleys. Oh, that's probably a delicacy somewhere like in Istanbul. Okay, so what?
I've got vanilla on this. I've got,
taste it?
yeah, it's got a creaminess to it. It's got a little bit of vanilla to it. I definitely get the peaches.
Wow.
Isn't that good?
It's very smooth on the tongue. Like when you first
Yeah.
taste it, it just tastes like velvet going over your tongue, and then you kind of taste more of the notes on the back of your tongue.
Yeah, velvet's a good word. It's a nice, it's creamy. It's a beautiful
It is.
beer.
Yeah, creamy. That's it. Creamy
Yeah,
word. Yeah,
it's
yeah.
a beautiful beer.
Okay, so let me talk about, let me see, this one in the middle. Okay, so this is cool. So this is Maiden and Priest. This is a German black lager. I've never had a German black lager, so this is very cool. So it's like a light beer, but it has characteristics of a dark beer. And it looks like a stout, but it's not a stout. It's a lager. So let's see, 5.5% alcohol. The body is light and crisp, which is true. I tried it. The roast flavor on the nose is balanced by the dry malt character. Let's see if that's accurate. Yes, it does have a dry malt character. That's very nice. The finish is softly bitter with lingering, nutty, dark caramel notes. Yes, I taste the dark caramel notes. Right?
Oh, that's a German beer for sure.
Yeah.
No, having
fantastic.
lived in Germany and had German beer,
Yeah.
ich bin ein Berliner.
Okay, so let's go
Tomorrow
to
we
the
go
last
to
one that I have
Hamburg.
here. Okay, so I have a Cadets and Kings, and this was a collaboration with Anchor Brewing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, 5.8 alcohol by volume. It says grapefruit juice and grilled apricots wash over the palate. Subtle malt character on the nose with notes of biscuit, cracker, and roasted caramel. The hops are Mosaic, Idaho 7, and Simcoe. Do you want to try that?
Oh, hell yeah.
I like Simcoe hops. I've had some. Simcoe hops are very popular. I've had a lot of those. Moonraker uses a lot of Simcoe, and so does the Knee Deep Brewing up there that is around the corner from Moonraker in Auburn.
Oh, that's good.
Is that good?
That's really good.
Oh, nice.
That's,
I like that.
Oh,
These beers are excellent.
Yeah.
They've really
I'm glad we
perfected their
chose
craft
this
here.
place.
Yeah, me too.
They have really good beer here.
Yeah, we had an Anchor beer last night. That was one of the kegs at Brad's place. That was that one that we were drinking, the Hefeweizen.
I thought that was Lost Coast.
Oh, was it Lost Coast?
Yeah. it was
Oh,
Lost
okay,
Coast.
you're right.
Yeah. Because I generally lay off Anchor beer. We'll never be able to go there because I just said that. But yeah.
Okay.
Not my favorites, but these guys,
They're
I
all
mean,
right.
5 great beers.
Yeah, these are fantastic beers.
Yeah.
Very excited about this. So I'm going to sip on this, and Valerie's got some stats she's going to bring up, and we're going to talk about the market. Last time we talked about foreclosures. We're trying to pick a new topic each time, but every few we're going to have to give you a market update because you don't want 3 market updates a month, but you don't want no market updates in 2 months. So
There you go. So here's our market update.
yeah,
The market's on fire. It's a seller's market. And it's a seller's market. One of the things we're seeing in Contra Costa County in particular, and we're going to focus on that just because that's where we're both based, even though we both work, we're working in Solano County right now. We got 2 deals going right now in Solano, Alameda. We don't have anything over there, but we've certainly done a lot of work over there, and we do a lot of work in Contra Costa. Basically, the amount of homes available to purchase right now is down 18.5% from a year ago. So what does that say? It says it's a seller's market because there's less inventory for the buyers to buy. And that's been a consistent issue, is inventory. And we've been talking about it for probably 2, 3, 4 years now. And it's like we talked about a couple of times ago, the fact that for every 4 jobs we create in this area, we issue 1 housing permit. So saying hypothetically, of those 2 jobs, one's taken by one partner, one's taken by the other, we've got 2 over here that didn't get a house and don't have any place to live. So, that's
supply and demand, right?
Oh, supply and demand, absolutely. And it's like, what changes that?
Yeah.
And there's a few things that change it, but right now, basically, unless you're going to live in a refrigerator box under $680, which is what your option.
You need a place to live.
You need a place to live. I mean, are you going to be Howard Hughes and stay at the penthouse at the Waldorf?
No, we serve the general public. That's why write-offs are easy, right? Because everybody can be a potential client. But she's got a point. Regardless of what's happening with interest rates, with market stimulus, with the heat of the market, there is an underlying supply shortage, and there is a huge demand for housing.
And it's been ongoing for 11 years now.
Rentals are hot, exactly, and home buying is hot. It's like even if you look back during the meltdown, 2008, 2009, 2010, you know what went up when everything else went down? Rents. Why? Because people still needed a place to live. That's the thing. We're not selling cryptocurrency. We're not selling something we're selling a necessity. Like people have to have a place to lay their heads at night to sleep, and they need what there's not enough of.
3 basics: food, water, shelter.
It's food, water, shelter, exactly.
Yeah, and quite honestly, you can go anywhere in the world, and what's the answer? Food, water, shelter.
Yeah, it's nice to be selling one of those.
Yes.
But they need to issue more permits. I mean, California, they're trying to do their best. Basically, the state is kind of trying to stimulate new home starts in a variety of ways. It started several years ago when California made it easier to add additional dwelling units, they call them, or you might know them as an in-law unit to a single-family home. And then they made it even more easy in 2018. They expanded that law to say that you can have 2 per single family home. And then this year, Gavin Newsom, he signed into law this thing that allows you to turn a single family home into a multi-unit, like a triplex, a legal triplex, fourplex, which has a little bit of a different legal definition, and it gives you a little bit more flexibility than just adding in-law units. You're a little restricted on size and accessibility on those. So he's trying to push new homes that way, but really what really needs to happen is that regulation needs to go down. We're over-regulated in California, probably because we care a lot about the environment and we don't want things to go haywire, but at the expense of people not being able to afford where they live, type of deal, right?
Well, it's the pendulum, and it always swings too far this way, then it swings too far, and we can't ever find ourselves
that way. It's always been way too far.
Well,
in California, my dad did a development in like 1990s. I think it was 1991. He got out of it. It was down in Los Banos, and they were going to sell this development and make tens of millions, whatever it was, tons of money, right? They didn't. They got out and they broke even on it, which is not what you want to do on a development like that. But it was like 100 houses or something like that. He had a partner down there, and the reason it went belly up and they couldn't, the market turned, and so that was one big thing. But the other thing was they got sued by environmentalists because they were encroaching on the flyaway of the ducks. So the ducks, their flight pattern was being encroached upon by these single family houses, as if the ducks couldn't fly over them. And they got stopped. They ran into huge hurdles, had to spend a ton of money fighting these people. But that's the kind of stuff, and it's not bad. I mean, obviously we care about the ducks. Obviously we care about the environment.
Well,
but there's a balance to.
I'm an environmentalist. I will tell you that straight up.
Yep.
And the ducks could fly around. I'm just going to say that the ducks could fly around.
How about the red-legged frogs? You find one of those on your property. I heard a lawyer tell me one time, if you find one of those, get rid of it, dispose of it as discreetly and quickly as possible, because some of these endangered species, like there's this red-legged frog, they find them on one of these things, and your whole project gets paused. You can't do any more because they found this frog and it's like...
Well, it's like Shell Mound in Emeryville.
Yeah.
And that's a racket where it's truly a racket where you've got to haul in a shaman, and you pay.
Really?
Yeah.
No way.
You haul in a shaman, and shaman, basically you make a donation to the tribe, and the shaman says, "Yeah, it looks good." And I'm like,
that is a new contingency on the RPA coming out in 2022.
Oh,
the shaman contingency.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean,
77 days.
Yeah, read up on the Shell Mound project in Emeryville.
So basically, you can just bribe the shaman.
Yeah, pretty much. Which
we should send this video to the shaman.
Oh my God! Every shaman in town.
They just went up.
But
prices go up with risk, and now his risk is higher, so he needs more money.
Everything, I always say, work it out without the government, because the minute the government gets involved, you're paying a shaman. Yeah. That's the next thing. You're paying a shaman. Good luck. Yeah,
that's why all my weapons are unregistered. No, I'm kidding.
Mine are. Not kidding.
Yeah, well, we don't pay shamans, so there's that.
Well, there's that.
Yeah.
So anyway, back to the market. A year ago, when the market was red hot, the average day on the market in Contra Costa County was 27 days. That's pretty red hot.
What is it now?
14.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So the market is hot. So for seller, but here's the thing. Here's what really happens with the market. It's like you got to put a product on the market, and either you're putting a house that's dressed up, ready to go, pretty, all those things, or you're putting up a house that's a fixer-upper. And this in-between is not in the market anymore. And if you're in this in-between, it's painful. It's painful to be in the in-between. So what I say is, it's like if you need a ton of work, maybe no work is your answer, and go ahead and do it that way, especially since, oh my God, the cost of having work done right now.
It's so expensive.
Shall we talk about my stucco job?
Yeah, sure, let's talk about it. She got quartered
Stucco.
on her leg for stucco.
Stucco. I got a quote for doing restuccoing my house.
Yeah, they wanted $100,000 and a firstborn son. It was ridiculous.
Brutal.
Yeah.
Brutal. And I'm like,
for stucco.
For $106,000, I could feasibly afford to go apprentice with somebody, learn how to do it, and do it myself, and still save money.
Seriously.
Yeah. and not be selling real estate for those 2 months while I learned how to stucco.
Yeah, because that's what it takes, 2 months.
Yeah, and in 2 months I'd be a pretty good stuccoer.
I think you would be.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm like, that would be cheaper than paying $106,000.
She has a steady hand, so,
It could be good.
Not a lot of overspray, nice smooth trowel.
Exactly. Yeah, because you want that smooth look these days.
That guy didn't want to do your job. He was like, if you want me to do this job, I want to be paid a lot of money. You should, I was talking to some friends, they said $30,000, $40,000 ought to be your price around that.
Well, that's what I was expecting. I'm like, that's 6 figures.
Yeah.
This should not be 6 figures.
He's like, I have to go pay somebody and learn how to do this and then come back and do it. No, it's terrible right now. But there's a couple of things we got to talk about, and inflation's a big one. Let's discuss inflation. So people are really
it's huge.
People are really confused on inflation, and there's a lot of bad information out there. Jack Dorsey came out 2 days ago and said that he thinks that we're about to see stagflation or hyperinflation, which we're probably not going to see. That's probably not accurate, but he wants that to occur because he has like most of his net worth tied up in like Bitcoin. So, he would love for us to see stagflation because then his net worth skyrockets, right? And he's also promoting a new book that he's about to come out with. So he's got some dogs in that fight. I don't think that
his beard is like inflatable.
His beard is ridiculous. If you saw him on the street, you think he's homeless. If he was panhandling on the corner, I would be like, oh, okay, that makes sense. But he's worth like $2 billion.
Yeah.
So, anyways, stagflation. What is stagflation? That's basically when everything. Today you see inflation in industry-specific inflation, like the service industry,
right.
Restaurants, bars, etc. We're seeing inflation in the housing market because there's a lot of money pumped into the housing market, into the hands of people with low interest rates, a lot of money in the mortgage bonds, so rates go down. People are flush with cash, not having to pay their mortgages, etc. So a consolidation of liquidity allows people to buy, and coupled with low interest rates, and that causes inflation that kind of paces faster than supply and demand would naturally push up the price of homes if rates were in a normal environment. So we are seeing inflation around real estate. That's just the truth. We are seeing inflation in the service industry. We are seeing inflation, because of the supply chain, bottleneck crisis and not being able to get things, appliances, used cars, huge inflation on used cars. But stagflation is when everything goes up. In Germany, they couldn't print money fast enough to keep up with inflation, and at one point they were even printing money on one side of a paper bill. It would be the equivalent of billions of dollars to buy, of today's money, to buy a loaf of bread in Germany. And that's not sustainable, and that causes massive economic degradation and tons of problems, and that's where people go and rush and buy all these, precious metals and all these things, and that's why there's these, commercials on Fox News and AARP and all these other places that older people are watching. Oh, put your money in precious metals because of inflation. Okay, well, precious metals are actually an oversaturated market today, if you didn't know that. Gold, there was a surplus of gold. It exceeded demand of gold last year. So gold is not like, you shouldn't think, oh, there's inflation, let's go throw my money into precious metals. Probably not. You gotta probably throw your money into like Bitcoin or Ethereum or something, or a strong coin, like that. But precious metals are no longer the way of the future. That used to be the case because people were used to the idea that money was compared to a precious metal standard. We were on the gold standard until, was it 39 when we moved off the gold standard? It was under Hoover, Roosevelt? I don't know my history that well on that one. But anyways,
I thought it was Nixon, but...
No, it was before that. We moved off the gold standard, and then money was not based on a material standard. So then it's a lot easier to print additional money to say, we need more liquidity. For the Federal Reserve, that was an important thing to do. And they didn't have enough gold to back up the amount of liquidity they needed to keep the country and the economy stable. So where was I going with this? Inflation. Okay, so inflation is really important to look at. So inflation shot up to 4% in July, 3.98%, which was way higher than they wanted it to go. And the Federal Reserve, they've been doing something called, now stay with me on this, I know this is long and drawn out and technical, quantitative easing. We've talked about this before. But when the economy tanks, the Federal Reserve can step in and stimulate the economy through a couple of ways. They lower the federal funds rate, which is the rate at which banks have to borrow money from the Federal Reserve in order to keep their reserve requirement. Because if you have $100 with the bank, they have to have $10 for every $100 you have with them. They have a reserve requirement for the amount of money deposited with them. So if they don't have that, they have to borrow it from the Federal Reserve. And that cost of money trickles down to consumers in a number of different ways. And so they lower the federal funds rate to zero, and then they take cash that they are printing, and they buy mortgage-backed securities, treasuries, and corporate bonds. So they stimulate the economy. Buying mortgage-backed securities is the one we're going to focus on today. it lowers mortgage interest rates on 30-year notes. So if you go get a 30-year fixed loan, which is pretty much what everybody gets, they've lowered the price of those by buying mortgage-backed securities at a really high rate. They buy tons and tons of them, billions and billions of dollars a month. And so they came out a couple of months ago and said, we're going to start tapering the amount of bonds that we're buying. And it's not time to taper yet, in my opinion. The economy is not back. Certain sectors are performing well, but certain sectors are performing really terribly. We still have a lot of people that are filing unemployment claims. We still have a ton of job vacancies. We have a lot of businesses that can't operate at full capacity or make good profit because they cannot find good work to hire because they're being paid to stay home by the federal government. It's more, I talked to a waitress the other day, she goes, I haven't been to work in over a year because I'm getting paid more to stay home than it would cost for me to go back to work. And it's just not worth it for me to go back to work when I'm getting paid this much money to stay home. So she's not worked in a year and a half.
Well, there's a secondary problem there. Well, it's like if you can't afford to pay a wage that is livable, are you really a viable business?
That's a great question when we're not in the middle of a pandemic.
True.
I mean, industries are hit really hard. Businesses, restaurants, bars, they can't afford to pay what would be considered a livable wage in today's economy. So you can't pay a waitress $12, $15 an hour plus tips, or a waiter. Sure, it would be great if you could pay them $20 an hour. In-N-Out Burger pays like $25 an hour to $30 an hour, and they send you to college. And then you have to make like $250,000 a year. But you know what? In-N-Out Burger is always busy. They never have a vacancy in their line. There's always people in line buying In-N-Out Burgers, all right?
Yeah.
You know, if you're selling, it's like gold for them.
Which gets back to, are you a viable business?
Well, no, because a viable business, everybody can't
well,
eat
In-N-Out
Burger. How many burgers could you go get in Concord? Like 100 different burger joints in Concord?
Right,
I mean,
but my point is,
the best one.
But their business model is really good and has been solid since day one.
Yeah, but then what about the mom and pop businesses that aren't as busy in
well,
In-N-Out
they
Burger?
were.
Are they just considered not viable because they're not as successful as In-N-Out Burger?
Well, In-N-Out Burger was a mom and pop. He actually built the original one out of cinder block.
Well, Amazon was mom and pop. They used to sell books on the internet.
Am
I wrong?
No, you're not wrong.
I mean, isn't there a secular aspect to this where we're outside of a regular market, so viable business test should not be the only consideration as to like the wage that can be paid?
Oh, I know, and the fact that we're in the pandemic certainly plays into it.
Like
I
Jenny,
agree.
Like we talked to Jenny the other day, and she runs a senior care thing, and she's like, I'm having a hard time finding help. And the way that she makes money is, she helps seniors in the community, and they pay a certain amount of money, and then she takes some of that money and pays helpers. Now, she can't just raise that price by 20% because people are being paid to stay home. The federal government needs to stop paying people to stay home and let them go back to work. It's like if my dog is not hungry, I'm not going to feed her. Like if I try and train my dog with a treat and she doesn't want the treat, she's skipping her next meal, and then she's going to want the treat next time, and then she's going to eat it. And it's the same idea. People are not dogs, obviously. That's not the idea. The comparison is that if people are not hungry, they're not going to go out and work. And when you pay people this much money to stay home, last year when my wife was laid off in between jobs, she was worked for Chicago Title, got laid off, and then got hired back. She made more money in the time she was laid off than she did when she got hired back.
Well, the question is, and it's not a matter of making more money. It's as much as it's a matter of is it enough money to subsist in this economy.
Well, we didn't need it because I was working, but of course the government doesn't look at that because they don't make sense when they do. They don't make.
Well, we're back to if the government was involved.
No,
then
they sent me $100 last year. I have a full-time job. I was paying my bills. I didn't need $100. I knew people that needed $100, but if you give everybody like me that has a full-time job and is making money and paying their bills $100 in the United States, that's a lot of money that's ill-spent. And so if we look back at inflation wasn't a problem when the Federal Reserve was buying mortgage-backed securities and stimulating the economy. Inflation was a problem when Biden signed the bill that put $2 trillion into the hands of Americans that didn't need it. It should have gone to the Americans that did need it. That would have been fine. I wouldn't care if it was 10 trillion, 2 trillion, whatever. Yeah. You just flooded the economy with money to people that didn't need it.
Yeah.
And that's when we saw inflation go from 0.2% to 3.98%. It's skyrocketing. And so now the Federal Reserve is going, okay, there's inflation concerns on the horizon. What if inflation continues to rise? We have to keep it in check. Right now it's 2% above target. They adjusted their target, I think because they didn't want to alarm the whole world, when they said that our target is no longer 2%, it's 4% for the rest of the year, and then we're going to try and get it back under control. What if it's going to go beyond 4%? 5-6% inflation could be really unhealthy for our economy as a whole. And so they said, well, we're going to start tapering bond buying, because the idea is that if you're printing more money to buy bonds, you're pushing more money into circulation, and so you're devaluing the currency. However, there's a dichotomy when it comes to quantitative easing, and that is that you are stimulating the markets which you are putting the money into, and international investors pour money into those markets, and when they do, it increases the value of our dollar, and it increases the value of our bonds. And by doing so, it causes deflation, not inflation. And we know this because we've been doing it for the last 12 years. And if we would just look at that and go, okay, that's the model. See, if you print money and you just give it to people, like if you just gave me $100 and everybody that had a job like mine or whatnot, $100, you cause massive inflation. If you take that money and you go, we're going to put it into something like our treasuries, we're going to strengthen our dollar, our bonds, we're going to make international investors pour money into our bond market. Part of the value of our dollar is based on how valuable is it to other currencies. When I married my wife, the value of the real, or as they say in Brazil, the real, it was like 3 to 4 real for every $1 American dollar. During the pandemic and after quantitative easing had kicked back in, and before the $2 trillion stimulus that caused 4% inflation, it went up to 6 to 1. During that time, we took like 10 grand and we converted it into Brazilian reals. We got a crap ton of money in a Brazilian bank account right now. It's since changed. It's come back to about 4.5 to 1. But that's the issue. And so inflation as a whole. So in my opinion, they should not taper quantitative easing, because that stimulates the economy. And they should be very careful and selective when they push money into the hands of Americans. And they should do it, but they should do it for the people that need it. They shouldn't give money to people like, what I did with $100? I took my wife out to sushi. You know what I would have done if I didn't get the $100? Taking my wife out to sushi. Okay? Did not matter.
That's the thing, and it's like I've got a crap ton of money sitting in an account that the federal government sent me, and
it gave you. Can you say the number?
I don't know if
roughly, it's a lot.
It's more than $50,000. It's a
lot of money.
It's a lot of money.
They didn't give her any paperwork on it.
There's no paperwork.
They just deposited it into her bank account.
And I'm sitting here going, and I've asked them a couple of times. It's like, would you like this back?
And how many homes have you sold in the last 90 days?
Something like 8 or 9.
A lot.
Yeah, and it's like I don't need it. I didn't need it then. I filled out the paperwork because we didn't know what the pandemic was going to be.
Yeah.
And for me, it was no big deal. It's like I've skated through the whole thing. I'm very lucky, and I'm thankful for that.
And so am I, because we're in a business where it stayed alive during the pandemic. But there's people that are not, that needed that money
that
they
are
could
hurting.
selectively given it to, that probably wouldn't have caused inflation and would have kept the market stable. Inflation is a scary monster. You got to keep it in check, but nobody can ever control inflation. The Feds say we want to control inflation. They can't control inflation. They can try.
Now I'm going to go back to my favorite all-time Gerald Ford moment, and it didn't involve him tripping.
Okay. I didn't know he tripped.
Oh, he tripped all the time. That was like his whole thing, is Jerry Ford tripping over stuff.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. That guy fell down all the time.
Poor guy.
I know. He was a mess. A decent guy, but he was a mess. Anyway, back in, I'm going to say 75, 76, they came out with Whip Inflation Now buttons, win buttons.
No, whip inflation. What is whip inflation?
Whip Inflation Now. So that was Jerry Ford, and I remember him sitting and talking in front of the, and at that point in history, you'd sit and listen to the president talk. Now, I know Biden talked last week. I didn't listen to it. No, I never listened to a single thing Trump said.
Every day I get like White House briefing notifications on
I don't
Facebook,
listen to that stuff.
I don't listen,
Yeah, I don't think I've ever listened to anything Biden said.
The media is so biased, and what you hear from a press secretary is filtered down. So I will listen to sound bites from what a president says, but when you get into the media rooms, like the White House press briefings, you've got this room full of biased media asking biased questions, and the questions are not questions, they're leading into answers that they're trying to get them to. Got an Eagle Fang and a...
I love their names.
They have cool names. And Stars Aren't Blind. Why don't you tell us about the Stars Aren't Blind that's right there?
Is that what I'm drinking?
Yep.
I thought I had Eagle Fang.
No, but you can switch it out or you can try them both.
Oh, that's right, dry hop Belgian. Which is funny you should mention a Belgian, because I've just ordered a new vehicle and it just spent 5 days in Belgium.
Oh.
And I'm like, you all better be loading that thing up with beer and chocolate.
There'll be beer and chocolate in the trunk when it arrives.
Exactly. I'm going to be pissed
It's
off.
going to be melted and the beer's going to explode when you open it, but it'll be here.
No, it's cold. It's cold in Belgium right now.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Totally.
So this is dry, 7%. Okay, the nose is very floral. It's very hoppy. I don't know how you can get to floral. Dry citrus, I get that. Accompanied by Belgian esters that give the beer a depth and character. Let's see if we have depth and character. It's one
Belgian
of my
ester.
I have no idea. Oh my goodness.
Is it good?
That's really good.
Okay. Can I try it?
Yeah. It's
I
wow.
I smell the floral esters. Sorry. I can't
What
say
the
that.
hell is an ester?
I can't say that with a straight face. I do smell the floral. Whoa. That's nice. I like that a lot.
It's really good.
Okay, so this is Eagle Fang.
Eagle Fang.
Eagles don't have fangs, but that's funny. You can imagine if they did, they'd be really, really vicious. Depth and richness in the color and nose. Yes, that's true. Light, refreshing, and easy to crush. Okay, we'll see what that's like. 5.5%. That's a very obtuse description.
Yeah.
It's kind of vague. I don't know. I don't taste a whole lot on that. Tell me what you think. I think that's why they probably wrote that description, because they can't describe what it tastes like.
I'd say it's got nothing on the nose, but we all know my
nothing on the nose, maybe nothing on the tongue. It's not a bad beer, but it's not like there's nothing standing out to me on that one.
That's just a good drinkable beer.
It's just a good drinkable beer. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It doesn't have Belgian esters in it.
Might have Belgian esters. We'll have to figure out what a Belgian ester is.
It's undetectable unless you read about it in the description. Okay.
What is that?
What are we going to talk about next? We talked about stimulus money. We talked about inflation. We talked about why we should not stop quantitative easing. Quantitative easing should be gradually pulled out of. Biden should not renominate Jerome Powell. Biden, if you're listening to this, do not renominate Jerome Powell in January. Nominate somebody else. In fact, go talk to Janet Yellen and tell her that you want her to leave the Treasury and go over to the Federal Reserve. She won't do it, but that's what you should have done. They never should have put Janet in that position, because although she's very smart, I think Janet Yellen is a genius. The Treasury Department is a very sought-after position. And if you put somebody in charge of it, you're going to have a hard time getting them to do anything else after it. I mean, James Baker...
Well, you know who was the original head of the Treasury?
Hamilton.
Hamilton.
Yes. We
Just like my country,
Yeah.
I'm young, scrappy, and
Yeah. Just like my country, I'm young, scrappy, and hungry, and I'm not throwing away my shot. We just saw it together in San Jose.
which was a very nice production.
Very nice. My friend Darnell was on it. I'll tag you, Darnell. It was incredible. He did a great job. He was General Washington, and they do the song, "Here Comes the General." And when he came out, he says he has such a booming baritone voice.
His voice is beautiful.
It just like throws you back. You're like, whoa. It's very cool. I always loved listening to him sing. We sang in choir together in college, and when he would have solos, I would just shut up. I was supposed to sing, but I wouldn't because I wanted to listen. I'd be like listening, because it would just make the hair on your arm stand up. It was really good.
So yeah, the Department of Treasury is a big deal.
Yeah, totally.
Because
and Hamilton was
the first one. There's your trivia.
And then James Baker, I read a book on James Baker. Now she's reading it. We throw books back and forth at each other because we both like to read. And he was in charge of the Treasury, but he was the chief of staff for Reagan.
Yes.
For like how many years? 6 years?
Yeah, longer than most.
Longer than he wanted to be, and he wanted to get out of the position. It's a very demanding, stressful job, but he didn't want to take other positions that were beneath chief of staff. And so, obviously, Treasury, you're in the cabinet, so that's pretty high up. And then from Treasury, he went to Secretary of State under George Bush. And I would argue that he's maybe one of the best secretaries of state we've ever had, just because of his abilities to make friends with world leaders around the globe. He got the first sit-down. He got the first Israeli-Palestine Middle East peace deal sit-down, and the biggest hurdle that he had to overcome was actually just getting them to sit down. They didn't really come to any sort of substantial agreement, but it paved the way for future discussions. But getting them to sit down, I mean, they had stipulations like, we'll be there, but we won't shake their hand, or we won't look at them, or we won't address them directly. And he had to overcome these petty things. And you know, he had kind of a temper, but at a certain point, and you'll hear this in the book if you haven't gotten there already, he'll be like, he'll like yell or walk out of meetings like, damn it, sit down, because these things are stupid. You're trying to make peace between nations, right?
And they're like, I'm not going to shake his hand.
I won't sit down and shake his hand. It's like, damn it, just sit down and shake his hand.
Quit being a jackass.
Yeah, exactly.
Well,
Stop violating rule number 1.
Yeah, exactly. Don't be a dick. And I have to go back over this period of history, but it's like, I don't know that Kissinger, because he's the one that brought China to the table.
He was, but he was...
Even though that didn't hold at the time, it paved the way for where we are now, which I think is a better place than where we were.
And Kissinger was very influential and very powerful, but he had a big ego, and he cared a lot about his ego. And ego was number 1, and I think the country and our relations with other countries was number 2. And that's something that James Baker brought out, because he inadvertently offended Kissinger and almost lost his job.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this is early on in his, foyer into politics, and so he's like, I had to, make nice, because I didn't realize how delicate, the egos are of the people that hold positions in Washington. And I think he said something to a reporter that got reported, and then Kissinger was like up his ass, like wanted to fight.
It called him in.
Yeah.
It's like he called him to the woodshed.
And he thought his career was over.
Yeah. So, didn't know you were getting a history lesson today, did you?
No.
Here we go.
We just went to school.
Yeah, we just went to school.
Yeah. So, anyways, it's a pretty good wrap up for where we're at now. I'm hoping that rates turn around. They've gone up over 0.5% in the last 45 days, which really takes away from demand. But again, there's underlying demand that's really strong, so I don't think that we're going to see a complete erosion of demand. Like, I don't think it's going to go away. I think it's going to continue to be a seller's market. In the Bay Area, in California at least, we have a lot of jobs, a lot of money, and a huge demand and a huge lack of housing starts. And that's been the continual story.
And this $64,000 question is, where do we hit critical mass? It's like, where do we get to a point where the prices have pushed past where the buyers can actually afford it anymore? Because there'll be a point where the buyers actually can't afford it anymore, and it's like, where is that number? And we're not there yet, but we're pushing up against it for sure. And it's like, that's why we're putting buyers in Solano County. Now, granted, we're putting them in a community with great schools, fantastic housing, safe neighborhoods. All everything you want is where we're putting them, but they're driving to the city.
They are. And I've seen a lot of this recently. So when rates started to go up and things started to slow down, because my business definitely slowed down by about 25% over the last, I would say, 90 days for sure. I just had to work harder to stay busy because for a while it was just nuts. People were calling you out of the blue. I've gotten a lot of weird loan requests. So in the last week, I've done a bank statement pre-approval where I qualified somebody based on just bank statement deposits because they showed that they lost money on paper. I qualified somebody based on assets. They had a lot of assets in the bank, so we didn't need to worry about their income. I qualified them on that. What else have I done? I qualified, I just got another loan where I qualified somebody based on what's called debt service coverage ratio, which is when you have a rental property, but you show that you're losing income on paper on your taxes, but your rental property is cash flowing. So all we do is we look at your rental property and go, it's cash flowing, great, you're approved. So as long as the property that you're financing, the cash flow covers the debt, we're happy, right? And so that's called a debt coverage ratio loan. So I've done one of those. And I've got it just inundated with requests. I had a gal call me the other day. She's a tattoo artist. She's making money, but she was hit hard by COVID. On paper, she's lost a lot, but she wants to buy an $800,000 home. Similar situation. We've got to look at bank statements or stated income or some sort of alternate financing. So it kind of brings people out of the woodwork, I think, when it gets near the critical mass. Because most of the working class people, I think you lose a lot of affordability. I think a lot of people that are in the working class can't afford to buy in the areas near where they live, and so they kind of pull back. There's a little bit of a retraction, and it slows down the growth. I don't think we've outpaced what people can afford yet, but I think we're close, and I think it's pulled back growth. And the 5-year forecast for real estate growth in the Bay Area is really between 3 and 5%, as opposed to what it's been for the last 10 plus years, which has been like 6.5 to 10%. And in some cases, like last year, 2020 to 2021, if you looked at July to July, a lot of areas had 15 to 20% growth, which is really unsustainable and quite unhealthy, but needs to be followed by a little bit of a retraction because you can't have that much growth and then keep it sustained, and so that requires because people's incomes drive up home prices, and incomes are rising at 2 to 3% per year, and that should be outpacing home price increases, but it's not been. Home price increases have been outpacing income increases for over 10 years. But back to what Val was talking about. What did you say? Something about the cyclical nature of the market, which means
business is cyclical.
Business is cyclical.
So it expands and contracts.
It does, and that's regular. Secular is when something outside affects it, like a virus from a third world country.
There's that.
There's that.
So, I think we're close to a wrap here.
Yeah, I just finished my 4th beer, I think.
That's pretty close to a wrap. The good news is we're going to miss Joseph next week, but we are on the road, and we'll be coming to you with a couple of live.
From Kauai. We're going to be in Kauai.
We're going to bring the jackassery.
Yeah. Yes, that's 100% accurate. And we got tickets for $73 each way on Southwest, and we're bringing a tent, and we're sleeping on the beach. So it's a free trip.
And yeah, we're getting cases of whatever they have at Costco, and we're going live.
We're going to build a fire every night, spearfish, and then golf during the day. No, but we will come live from Kauai. It's a beautiful island, and we're going to have a lot of fun. We'll be there for
long enough to get in trouble.
Yeah. What could go wrong?
What could possibly go wrong?
Yeah.
Stick with us.
Well, thanks for tuning in today. This has been a lot of fun. Check out Fieldwork. I am wearing their sweatshirt. They have some really cool decor and artwork out there, but this room is really bland, so I went and bought the sweatshirt. They have some really cool some merch out there, and they have great beers. They've got a huge list and a lot more than just hazy IPAs, which I love. So anyways, thanks for tuning in today, and we'll see you next time.
All right, and stop by Fieldworks.
Yep.